Yo, what is up, everybody? John from Tau Tactics here, bringing you another video. Today we've got a pretty special one. We're talking to the top two placing Tau players from the Nova Open, which is a 380-person super major out here in the U.S. They both brought Mont'ka, so we talk a little bit about how Mont'ka fits in the current meta here in the U.S., what they brought list-wise and why they brought it, the MVP unit from the tournament in their opinion, and also, if they were going to a tournament next weekend, what changes to the list they would make, if any. Shameless plug here, Noah is a client of mine. We did specifically prepare for this tournament, talking through list building ideas, adjusting positioning based on the layouts and deployment and whatnot. So if that's something that you're interested in, you're preparing for a tournament, or you just want to get better with Tau, reach out to me at Discord. My @ is John Kilco, John Kilco, and we can figure something out together. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. So the first thing I wanted to ask you guys was just each of you, if you could walk me through your list, if there was anything that you were specifically checking for in the meta, and if so, what was that? And just kind of your list building process in general.
Pretty standard for the most part. I mean, 2 Cadre, 2 Breach, Devilfish, 1 Piranha, Brutox Rider, 2 Hammerheads, both with rails, unit of Pathfinders, unit of Vespid, super normal, and then I've got a Tiger. Kind of the one thing I'm throwing in there, kind of my flavor, and also I think it solves a important Tau meta as it is currently.
And tell me a little bit more about, like, how did the Tiger Shark perform for you? Like, yeah, just explain a little bit more of like the thought process behind like the list and like, because we've talked about it, but yeah, it'd just be great to hear more about like the what you were seeing in your local meta and what caused you to want to continue to bring the Tiger Shark, even though there's been a nerf to it, right, a month or so ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was there. I've been playing the Tiger Shark for about 2 months now. So I was there pre-nerf, and then I was there. Or sorry, I was there pre-buff, and then I was there for the buff, and then I was there post-buff.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that it got buffed, it was very obvious to me that it was going to be a little busted. And I mean, obviously there was the whole WTC thing where some WTC players were going to call it, the year of the Tiger Shark or whatever they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of obvious is good. I was playing it. It was probably too good. But then as the moment it went back to old rules, people automatically wrote it off. So did I. I threw it out, grabbed a third Hammerhead, some more scoring pieces, and was like, this Tau list is very, very normal. It makes sense. But then I realized that some of the matchups that I was just kind of killing before started being issues, like Blood Angel. Blood Angel's on layout 1, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Layouts or terrain where you can't interact with big staging units, or maybe you can, but only once or twice. So, the Shark gives you a really ridiculous answer to staging. So
Mm-hmm.
you just bring it in, and it deletes whatever was staging, or makes your opponent not be able to rapid ingress quite as effectively. I also realized that the Thousand Suns matchup felt a whole lot worse without it. I do not like that matchup without a Tiger Shark. With the Shark, you pretty much almost guaranteed delete the Vortex unit, or you can also threaten Magnus really well, or even kind of like bait him out to come play. So Thousand Suns and Blood Angels were the 2 matchups that I think really helpful in.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some that it doesn't help in. For instance, Sisters. I don't think it helps in that matchup. I think if anything, it's a liability.
What makes you say that?
Well, they're an army that can just kind of kill it regardless of where it comes on, whenever it comes on.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have range 48 on their big guns, and most importantly, they have hunter killers that are automatically 6 damage.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
The moment one sneaks through.
Yeah, I played the Tiger Shark for a little bit there when it was unnerfed. And every Sisters player I played against just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, I can't beat the Tiger Shark. They advanced their entire army at me, would table me on the ground, and my Tiger Shark would just be doing loop-de-loops, So there's also that aspect of they can just table you faster than you can handle it before that Shark can come on.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people tell me that Tau is favored into Sisters, but I think, to your point, like, we can just get run down early. If you don't get like a good move block off with the Pathfinders, like if the Sisters player is doing what I think is the right thing, which is bringing the infiltrating unit, then it's like really super dependent on who gets the first drop, in my opinion, like how that matchup goes. Because if you can block out all the immolator scouting, then you're not getting run down immediately, and you got a fighting chance. But to your point, having like a 300-point hole in your army to start the game is certainly rough when they can just shove.
I'm really surprised that people would think that. In my experience, that Sisters matchup is really rough for it. A lot of the shooting mirrors I find to be really rough for Tau because we have to expose 2 units for every 1 unit that they expose, right?
Yep.
Because of our spotting mechanic.
Sure.
So I find matchups like the Sisters matchup, the Guard matchup, these like really long range, grind them out, shoot them down matchups to be really rough for us because we're exposing 2 for 1 essentially. So sorry, continue, Noah, but I just wanted to hop in there.
Oh no, that's a super like interesting viewpoint. I think the Guard matchup is totally dependent on what your build is. If you have double rails and a shark, I don't know if that matchup is possible. I actually have played Guard probably 14 times, or maybe 13 in Prep Nexus. One of my main practice partners who actually went to Nova as well is a Guard player, and we put every variation of Guard on the table to practice for Nova, and rails and sharks make it miserable.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about because you mentioned Riley before to me or I think I saw it actually in maybe it was the Art of War Discord where you were talking about the Ion Hammerheads being better into Sisters as opposed to, that hurts the Guard matchup, but I would say Tau has like a fairly favored matchup into Guard, even if you don't take the Railhead. So, anywho, I'd be curious, Riley, to hear, about your list building process. I saw you brought the 3 Ion Hammerheads. You've got the 3 Solo Piranhas. What else? You got the Triptide. No SMS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hit it off.
Yeah, sure. 2 Contra Fireblades, 2 Breacher Fish, a unit of Pathfinders, triple Stealth Suit, triple Hammerhead, triple Piranha, triple Riptide. Just building these redundant pieces that are really annoying and some of our best data sheets. Originally I wanted to play Yanari for this event, but didn't have the practice, didn't have the reps. That's a very hard army to play. So I just went back to my comfort of Tau. I play like 90-95% Tau in general. So just went back to that, and I was looking at the layouts. It was layout 4 and layout 6 on day 2 and day 3, which are really kind of open maps. So I was looking at that and I was like, day 1, I just have to either outplay my opponents or just get a couple of favorable matchups, which, I played World Eaters on day 1 and layout 1. So that was a rough matchup. I got lucky. Angron never came back.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. But, I was hoping to get a little bit of the softer opponents on day 1, which I don't think I did. I just think I got lucky when it mattered, which you kind of do need to for a hot run. But the rest of my list was really tailored for that day 2 on layout 4 and layout 6, where I was expecting a lot of other shooting armies to start to do really well on that back half. So I wanted these big durable things just to put in front of my opponents on the long shooting angles. And being in Mont'ka with that -1 damage strat, that immensely rewarded me throughout the rest of the tournament. The only thing on my list that I also have a Dark Strider, and I've got an Ethereal. That Ethereal, I really wanted it to be 2 Crude Ox Riders. I just didn't have any around at the time. So I just turned it into Ethereal, and the CP gain ended up incidentally being immensely helpful. But I think if I could go back and have those be Crude Ox Riders, just more trash, I would like that a lot better.
I do love my trash.
Yeah.
So one other thing that I was curious to hear from you too is around preparation before an event. So you kind of mentioned a little bit there, Riley, was just conceptualizing, hey, like on which layouts, like what types of units are going to be better. So I'd love to hear, Noah, if you could just give a little bit of an insight into like, I know that you've been playing Tau for what, is it 3 or 4 months now? Or is it even less than that?
I've been playing Tau for about like a week less than 2 months, or maybe right at 2 months.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'd love to hear like, as far as like your preparation, how you get up to speed. Like I know you played the Dark Angels Storm Raven list. Shame on you, by the way, for doing that. But yeah, I'm curious like what all went into like the preparation for the event and like, how you set yourself up to be successful at Nova.
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, but before Tau, I was on Dark Angel Storm Ravens, had had a good run on that. I was having a lot of success and a lot of with that list. When Pry was coming out, was trying to figure out what I was going to fit to, knowing that list was probably going to get dumpstered. It absolutely did. So kind of found Tau. I like shooting. My favorite part about Ironstorm was present fast shooting threats, kind of start a tempo game. But Tau's the difference between Tau and Ironstorm, in my opinion, was Ironstorm had less units but better individual units. Tau had more pieces, more trading pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it would really fit the ability to kind of start an actual trading war with Tau. But to get into why I picked it for Nova, I was between Chaos Knights, Tau for Nova. I also have a whole Chaos Knights army. I was looking into the meta and what was out there, and I was really unconfident in Chaos Knights, and I'm really glad I didn't take it. I think there's a lot of people, especially at the beginning of Raya, were taking big things, and people were also teching for killing big things.
For sure.
And I knew that if I played Chaos Knights, if I run into a bad matchup that has too much anti-tank, that it's almost unplayable. Where Tau, I do think there are bad matchups for Tau. I really do think Sisters is an awful matchup for us. But there's at least some skill expression there where, like, if you really outplay your opponent, you can still win. Same with Thousand Suns. I don't know if we have necessarily a favored matchup, but I know that for a fact that the better player on that table probably going to walk away victorious. And that's kind of what I was looking for as an army, where the skill expression could come through. So found Tau. And then as far as like the list itself in specific, the only thing I'm kind of doing that's not normal for Tau is, all of us here are all running Mont'ka, which a lot of people are not high on right now, as you feel like pretty much every pro player everywhere over the past few weeks or months have been saying Mont'ka might be the weakest other than Crude. I like the tempo. Every game I've ever played, I kind of like to be the person causing the problem. I don't want to have to constantly solve the problem. Like I want to be the issue sometimes.
Yeah.
And then and the shark kind of helps in that.
Yeah, about like causing the issue. A big thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Magic, but there's kind of there's archetypes that kind of ask a question of your opponent of, can you solve this? And then there's archetypes that kind of say, I'm going to come prepared to answer my opponent's questions. So an example of an army that asks a question is like World Eaters is the perfect ask the question. Can you deal with this advanced and charging army that's just coming at you across the board? Where an army that kind of has all the answers is like T-Suns, where they kind of sit back and they kind of trade a little bit, do some indirecting. And generally when it comes to Tau, we're able to do both just with how flexible we are. But I'm slowly coming around to being that person that asks the question of my opponent of like, I've got all of these things staged up ready to come and kill you. How are you going to deal with this? And I think that's something that Mont'ka does exceptionally well. And I think that, all of these top players, these pro players that like these Kaiyun and these retaliation cadres, they don't make as many mistakes during events. They're used to going to these really long events where, there is an appeal to being able to play the detachment where I see my opponent made a mistake. I'm going to turn my brain off and I'm just going to go get them. And Mont'ka probably has the best punish game compared to the other detachments. Retaliation probably has a decent one, but you don't have to work as hard for it in Mont'ka.
Yeah. You just pop the auto 6, boom, and they're breachers in your face. Boom, I flip the objective.
Yeah. And breachers are a big part to solving, T-Suns, right? That's a matchup that can be difficult. But if you can catch one cape outside of a ruin and get 10 breachers to see that single cape, that is, 3 to 5 cabal points gone, depending on which unit you're catching out. So that's and that's a thing that I've really liked about Mont'ka is it feels like that T-Suns matchup in Mont'ka is unlosable unless you're playing someone like TJ Lanigan.
Fair.
Very true.
Yeah.
Sweet guys. Well, one other thing that I was curious about was just like if you have any unit in specific that you're thinking about that would be like an MVP unit and like for the tournament and why.
Well, the unit that I really wanted to run but didn't end up running was the per Rana unit, like 1 unit of 3.
Yep.
I had probably about 25 games tested for Nova with that unit, some with Shark, some without. I really, really liked it, but right up before the event, I was getting a little worried that I'd walk into that the meta would shift out of the big stuff meta and into small stuff. And I really do not like that unit if I can't like actually alpha strike something turn one that's not 20 boys.
Mm-hmm.
So honorable mention to that unit, but actual MVP. It's either the Shark or the single 35-point crew talk trader, because that guy got me so many points.
Hell yeah.
He had no business getting me as many points as I did. Yeah, he's like the only thing in any army ever that I do not mind shoving him forward for and pushing a button for 2 points turn one. Right? It's like any other unit, like even a Piranha, it kind of hurts, but like crew talk trader, all right, press my button for 2 points, please. Like
exceptional
anytime.
value.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, it's the rapid ingressing breacher fish.
Oh wow.
It's so incredible. The amount of angles you're just able to catch people out with. I mean, it's just breachers in general. I think breachers are just absurd.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so hard to hide devilfish, so you can't really take 6 of them unless you're giving up riptides and hammerheads, and I like those a little bit. But it's just breachers for me. They always seem to be the MVP. Flipping objectives, if you pop the +1 AP against anything that's T11 or less with a 2-up save, you're handing them like 19 to 23 saves, and if they're on a 4-up, they're going to fail, 9 to 12 of them. And every opponent that puts their big dumb idiot in the center of the board, whether it's Magnus or whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
they're always shocked at like, yeah, I just lost 9 wounds to this breacher unit. You paid 1 CP for it because I'm on this objective. It's always just breachers seem to be this Swiss Army knife for our army as long as they are not T12.
Yeah.
If it's just a horde, they're gone. If it's just T11 or less, they're taking a bunch of wounds.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's always breachers, but specifically at this event, I started rapid ingressing a breacher fish because I took a spin with Blood Angels, and I learned a lot. I think a lot of Tau players could benefit if they could borrow a friend's army that is a mono melee army. I think you'd learn a lot because I learned a lot. I got a breacher fish rapid ingressed me when I played against Tau as Blood Angels, and I was like, wow. That's incredibly powerful, way more than I thought. I always thought having the breacher fish on board was more powerful, but in certain matchups, rapid ingressing that thing will just give you a reach you don't expect.
Yeah. I've never rapid ingress an actual full breacher fish. I've only ever done just the breachers, but that is an interesting concept because you can get angles on stuff that's otherwise would have been awkward, and
And I gave a lot of my opponents kind of the Sophie's choice, where we'd both be brawling down whatever long angle we were brawling down. I'd have like 2 riptides and a hammerhead back there, and I'd just rapid ingress my breacher fish right in front of them.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, hey man, my breachers are right there. If you want to kill them, go ahead. But if you don't, my riptides and hammerheads are going to tear you to shreds. And like, well, I really can't afford to, I don't always think that's the right choice. I think that's definitely like making my opponent make decisions that they don't know the answer to and I do against people that know what that answer is. That's not necessarily correct, but that is kind of a fun and interesting play you can make.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, to your point, also, like, with the amount of hulls that Mont'ka wants to play with, right? And I think you have
it's hard to fit them.
Exactly. If you have two fish, 3 hammerheads, and 3 riptides, like, man, it gets real crowded. Like, you're probably gonna get an angle on something. So it also has the added benefit of like giving you a little bit more space to play with in deployment.
Yep.
Like, I can only imagine what that would look like.
Breacher fish and
on
a
Search and
hammerhead
Destroy.
every turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reserved one of those every turn. I would have reserved the Riptide as well if I could have, but you don't have enough points.
Sure. Cool. And one other thing I was curious about was, like, from this tournament specifically, was there, and I know I'm putting you guys on the spot, so I apologize in advance, but was there anything that you learned that was new? And, like, if so, what was it? Like, any new interaction that popped up?
Yeah.
For you, Riley, it sounds
I've
like
got
the Breacher
one.
Fish. Oh, yeah, hit me.
I played a fantastic game against Sam Pope on Tyranids. He kind of schooled me a little bit, move blocked me, even though I've got fly. It was a very rough game, but I had not played the Tyranids matchup that much, so I did not realize how devastating that once per game just battle shock your entire army test can be.
It's
I knew we would lose the ability to guide and all of that, but I didn't realize, like, man, if you swing down a little bit on variants, they do that on your go turn, and that's what happened to me. I think the only thing that wasn't battle shocked was a Riptide and a stealth suit unit.
Jeez.
So, and that was my go turn where I needed to, go get them.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't able to get there, but that's okay. So we were talking after the game, and a thing that I learned, and maybe in that matchup, put the breachers inside of the devilfish, or not the breachers, sorry, the pathfinders inside of the devilfish. So that way, when they battle shock your entire army, you can guarantee you're gonna at least get 2 guides off.
Yeah.
And then it's okay to just have the breachers on foot in that matchup.
Sure.
And that's something that's not blatantly obvious unless you maybe have a Tyranid player in your local meta and you play against that a lot, or you've been told that before. I played maybe 6 games of Tyranids total, and 2 of them weren't when I was taking Blood Angels for a spin for an event. So that was something that I was like, that is a key learning that I'll now have for that matchup. If I'm playing Tyranids, I just need to keep those Pathfinders in a Devilfish to stop them from being battle shocked for my go turn. So just because they can guide twice. So that was something that was big that I learned. Just a small interaction, but the game is all about matchup knowledge, it feels like.
Yeah.
If I've played against something 10 times and my opponent's played against me, Tau, twice, I'm going to win that game. So
yeah, and like no
that
matter
was the
how
big one for me.
no matter how many times people tell you they're gotchas, like at least for me personally, like I have to experience getting got, before it really truly ingrains it into my brain. Okay, like now this makes a lot more sense to me. And to your point, like reserve manipulation against Tyranids, same reason. You can bring a unit in from reserves; they're not battle shocked. Similar to the point about the breacher fish, those are 2 really important things. It is nice that even if like a Riptide gets battle shock, it can still be guided, but you still kind of run into the same issue where if you only have like 2 or 3 units that can be like that can guide, then it really hampers the rest of your army.
Yeah. And I think my list was particularly susceptible to Tyranids because I only had like 4 units that had marker lights that weren't breachers.
Yeah.
So when those 4 units all got battle shocked in the same turn, I really felt it.
Yeah, absolutely. Noah, what about you?
I'd say mine in specific would be breacher fish placement into a melee army that has really good.
That is really good. What? Sorry, you could have
into a melee army that has really good staging.
Got it.
So I played a game into CSM Raiders day 2, where he had double Rhino, and in both Rhinos he kind of had the bricks of chosen with characters. So he had a bunch of units that could just very hard to interact with because the Rhinos would be behind a ruin. He would have a ton of threat range out of them. Very hard to set things on objective, like actually secure primary. So I came up with something. I forget what layout it was. I think it was Crucible.
Day 2's layout 4. Which round was it?
I think it was layout 4, but I think it was round 2. Yep, it was on Tipping Point. So on Tipping Point, what I kind of figured out was on the expansion objective, in that L, the way I figured out how to secure primary is I got my breaches out early, put him an inch off the wall, grab one of his bases, make sure that he couldn't base me from the other side of the wall. And then I just stuck a fish sideways, like kind of jammed it between the edge of the map and the edge of that L. And then the only way that he could get to my primary at this point was if he killed the fish and then kind of got around it into the breachers. Obviously, if you have a anti-tank threat up top and then anti-infantry threat up top, that does not work. But it only worked in this case because he put both his predators down on the bottom side of the map.
Got it.
To try and fight all the threats I had amassed at the bottom side of the map. So I saw that his threats were far away from the devilfish, so I knew that if I just stuck a fish as a wedge, sure, Legionnaires could have come out, killed the fish, and piled into the breachers, but I'm still holding that primary then, right? Like, the breachers may be tagged, I may have Legionnaires in my face, but guess what? I still got primary for that objective, and that was like a very important part of that game. I was just able to kind of guarantee primary And after he realized his predators were kind of out of position, tried to get back into position with them. But then at that point, the shark's coming in and killing him. So that way, he's never killing that devilfish without actually, using a hammer unit, which then he won't have for the breach. So
Sure. Yeah, that's super clever. I love using devilfish as like screens, like glorified screens, or like to block out a rapid. I'm just like, whatever, devilfish, you did your job. You're gonna go on your own journey. Have fun just tagging some random crap. Fun fact, by the way, like I've had people like tag me with legionary units before. You still get the extra shot from the cadre with the pistols, so you can still shoot them 20 times. You can still give them extra AP. You can still guide them. I've one shot a legionary unit just in combat with them after they piled in, which is an experience.
That's
hilarious.
Yeah,
that's great.
And so one other thing I'm curious about is when you look at like the list that you brought to the event, now knowing how it performed, are there any edits that you would make if you were bringing it to, let's say you were going to a GT this upcoming weekend? Like what changes would you make, and why?
It's kind of funny. Noah and I talked about our lists at the event, and we're both just like, we would never bring each other's lists. Well, not necessarily, but I'm not at all worried about the guard matchup because there's not a lot of guard players down here. So I'm just like, railguns are on the shelf because there are so many sisters out in my area that I can't bring the railgun. Where Noah, as you said, is like super concerned, like I need a railgun to at least solve that matchup and things like that. So I think, at least for me, I'd be shifting a little bit more kind of towards Noah's philosophy of having at least a railgun or some punch. Because I really did feel, I played against double Land Raider. I think I played against like 4 Land Raiders on day 1.
Oh my gosh, dude.
So I was like, man, I just ignored them and I just let those Land Raiders do whatever they wanted. And I was like, man, this, Noah's like, how do you beat knights? I'm like, I just have to outplay them. That's frankly what the problem is.
Yeah.
So, I think maybe shifting one of those hammerheads to a sky ray. Again, I talked about the ethereal, changing those ethereal to 2 crew docs riders. I just didn't have any on me at the time. They're up on my paint shelf right now, getting built. But that's the big one, is kind of shifting a little bit more towards at least having something that T12 has to respect. That would be the big one for me. Probably changing one of those ion heads over to a Skyray. I'm still a little terrified of sisters, so at least the Skyray's 300 killers, they can only really save one of them. But, it's just something to have, something to shoot at strength 12. That would be my big change.
Sure. Makes sense. What about you, Noah?
I'd like to find a way to get that 3 Piranha unit back into my list, but honestly, I do plan on going to LVO in January. I know that's kind of a few months out still, but like, say LVO was this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't think the list changes at all in form. I think this list does kind of something specific. It has its good matchups. It has its bad matchups. I feel like Tau is a very internally balanced codex, that we kind of have this really nice slider that we can kind of slide it to whatever matchup we want to favor or not favor, or a matchup that we don't think that we need help in, so that we can kind of like we can just kind of beat on skill and not on kind of list development. I am still seeing a ton of big stuff. Like in my Nova run, I ran into Imperial Knights, big Chaos Demon spam, guard twice. Like I just saw so many big things.
Opposite run of you, man.
Yeah, we talked about this. Like our lists are very different, and kind of. I mean, I guess it has to happen, to make it through a good run. But we both played into the things that we kind of were teched for. Like he did not, as far as I remember, like he didn't play into Knights or guard or anything big. But my list was teched. I had double railgun and a shark, and that's all I played. It was just big stuff constantly. And like if I didn't have double rails into either of those guard matchups, man, I could have gone very, very not okay. You have one turn of swinging down into a few Rogals that pop smoke, and like if your Riptides decide to not hit dev wounds and just not hit 5s on the wound roll, you are getting steamrolled. And I don't know if I'd want to get away or into a position where that could be an issue. Like I said, I did try the triple ion hammerhead build, and I think it's really good into some things. Like the guy that putting the event on the 100 CSM bodies, like Riley's
Oh,
list
it's
is
not.
a whole lot better into that list than mine
I
is.
still got. I lost to Derek. That was one of my losses, and just man, even with the ion heads, he just has so many bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, you need to start taking riptides with chain guns, or maybe just like 60 breachers. If I had 60 breachers, I'd be way better off. But
Yeah.
my list was very much designed for that 105 marine bodies to run at you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because hammerheads, oddly enough, have really bad profiles into those cultists.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as you shoot your 3 damage gun, they're like, all right, man, these tiny little cultists are dying. Then you shoot the 1 damage guns, and you're like, yeah, these 3
Yeah.
wound guys, they'll just eat them all day.
Mm-hmm.
So
And the blood surge is
that
super annoying to play around with the breachers.
Yeah.
Blood
yep,
surge is
I lost
such a
because
pain.
I lost because he was able to blood surge out of line of sight of my second hammerhead. So I had to have the Riptide shoot the unit, and obviously Riptide has no volume.
Yeah.
So
that was actually one
that was
medical. That was one medical that I kind of saw coming like a few weeks ago. After WTC and all these CSM like ACDC spam lists were coming out. I genuinely was thinking of like, how do I solve this as Tau? Like that was one of the things that I was very aware of. Like, man, Green Tide might be making a resurgence. Black Templar Crusader spam might be just after it won. Was it War Masters, right?
War Master, and it was on the French team that won.
Yep. Like after that, I thought I was going to show up to Nova, and I thought there was just going to be Crusaders and Green Tide and AC.
That's what I thought
everywhere.
too.
Really?
I legitimately thought that. But I knew at the bottom tables there would be a lot of things like Knights and Chaos Knights. So that's why I kind of kept the stuff. But the one piece that I genuinely think solves a lot of these bad matchups for me is a Tiger Shark. There are so many blast guns on that thing. There were 3 different times in this tournament that I one-shot an ACDC brick without Seekers with the Tiger Shark. And like, it has its weaknesses, but like that helps in that matchup a lot for me.
Yep, I think Derek's list may give you a challenge because he's able to, if he goes first, he can screen out your Tiger Shark just by being in your face. But if you can burn yourself a hole, yeah, that Tiger Shark will do a lot of work in that matchup.
Yep, it just picks up a brick every activation. It's one ACDC brick gone. Like you can take the wounds on however you want, but like it's going to get through it.
So many guns, yeah.
No, it's so many guns, and having blast on the 2 guns with volume that have some AP to push it to the invuln. No, it's so important.
Yep.
So yeah,
I will say it is difficult to tech. I mean, this is like, it's this way for every army, but like teching into like an army like Derek's, as well as being able to deal with like Knights or Chaos Knights, it's hard to live in both worlds, right?
I think Ret Cadre is the best for it.
Yeah.
Just because of that sustained 2 strat, and you have some burst guys.
Oh yeah.
Because the burst guys and the flamer guys, you can kind of interchange them a little bit. So if you're going Ret Cadre and you're really afraid of those cursed cultist lists, you can just go, all right, I'm going to have the, 2 to 3 of these burst cannon units. Probably 2 is what I would run to start, and then feel it out from there. Because you really don't care if you get blood surged into on that second unit. If both of them are going to go up there and shoot. You shoot that first one, pop the sustain 2 strat, and then your second one get blood surge into, and you're like, great, man. I'll hit you at -1s, but how much of your unit's realistically left at that point?
Yeah, for sure. And you could just fall back with those guys. My current Red Cadre list has 2 Sunforge and 2 Starsize, 1 Burst Cannon, and 1 Flamer. I know people really like the Fire Knives, but I find them to be, they have an awkward amount of shots for sustain 2, right? Like if you take all plasma, then you have like 9 plasma shots and 3 cyclic shots, and that's like, you could easily dodge a couple 6s there or hit 1, and then you're kind of left, like if you go into Chaos Cults, for example, you kind of have the same problem where you kill like 10 cultists, and then like the 6 or 8 big dudes just clean your clock. And then with the missiles, it's like the AP1 leaves a lot to be desired.
It's an issue.
Yeah, and like you don't want to 3-inch that unit away immediately. So, anywho, I do like the burst cannons too, especially for like stuff with -1 damage too. Like even just like if you're going into like Deathwing Knights with a character, like just getting sustained on the burst cannons and being able to fire a fade away, just pick up 2 or 3 of them is a big deal, because you stack the extra AP.
Yep.
Same thing with Bullgrins, that sort of stuff.
For
Absolutely.
sure.
Cool. Well, I'm curious. Like, one other thing I wanted to hear was just like if you had a favorite moment that stood out to you from the event, like an activation or like a close game at the end, and um, yeah, is there anything that pops
Oh,
pops into mind?
Go ahead.
I can start there. I'll give a shout out to the game that I was most concerned and excited at the same time to go into. And that was my I think it was day 2, round 3, where I played into triple Doom Scythe Hypercrypt.
Ooh.
I was terrified and excited at the same time to see what that list did.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard that was a thing, but I
Yeah.
hadn't seen it before on the table. And I was like, man, if he gets a go turn in the right spot, and obviously like Hypercrypt kind of gets to determine when their go turn and on what terms,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I think he just could delete my army and I can't do anything in return. So that was a game that was just fun to play because it was like it might have been the only table in the entire event hall that had 2 aircraft on the table at the same time from each player.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. Yeah, no, that was just a fun game because it was a bunch of planes shooting each other. It looked very cinematic, and the opponent was a good player. So
Hell yeah. Yeah, the Doom Scythes are spooky, especially in Hypercrypt, where you don't even have to like move them. You just bounce around the table, and they're pretty gross.
Yep.
And they have like built-in rerolls, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, or they sustain D3 or some crap like that.
yeah, they got the sustain, and they've also got the list I was playing into had the Silent King, which gave them the
Yeah.
real ones hit and wound, and so it's just like this little death ball of. It was like I think they're each 230 or something, so it's like 700 points you can just put down wherever you want in the perfect spot to prevent retaliation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Nasty.
that was a fun game.
Hell yeah. What about you, Riley?
I don't know if I've got a favorite moment, but my favorite game of the event was against Michael Butler on Sisters.
Okay.
Fantastic opponent, played very tight, had great movement. I really appreciate it when like the Firestorm Sisters player really takes their time to move really precisely, just because they do move so fast, and sometimes it feels like they play loose. On that game, that was one of the rare games that came down to the last turn. That was for second round of Top Cut, and it was really back and forth. He just has a lot of bodies as Sisters. Kind of hemmed me into my deployment zone for a long time, but eventually I was able to break my way out on one of the flanks, and that rapid ingressing breacher behind his lines, just because he left a hole eventually because he has to come forward. But that game against Sisters, when you play against a Sisters player who's really there and really with it, that's an incredibly tight game. And it's Pariah Nexus. I did have second turn advantage, so I was able to pull it out in the end. I think I won by about 15 points, which was about the second turn advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a just great game. Learned a lot about that Sisters matchup and how to try and take, not trade, because that's a big thing. They have so much trash that you have to be able to take some things without losing some of your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just hard to do outside of Ret Cadre.
Yeah.
But learned a couple of things about that. So
Sweet, man. Hell yeah. And I'd like to talk. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on, basically Mont'ka in general. Like I could easily say that Mont'ka is less popular. To your point, Noah, like other people have been mentioning that Mont'ka is not as strong as the other detachments. So, like Kyle Grundy, who's in the UK, which their terrain is quite different. But I'd still agree with his premise that Leviathan being a more late game oriented mission pack should lend itself better to a detachment like Kalyan. So I'm just curious, like, what your thoughts on that, if any, are like, hey, why Mont'ka is doing better over here versus overseas, and I'm just curious, like, detachment wise, kind of like what your thoughts are around the different detachments, because they all have play, in my opinion, but
yeah,
it's just kind of a matter of preference.
so there's a bit of that, but there's also like this is my understanding. There's a bit of a different style between European players and North American players.
Mm-hmm.
European players are generally fairly conservative, fairly minimal, fairly, do the smallest thing to get what you need to get and don't put out too much. Where American players, we're very aggressive. We're very come out and play. We have a different style. And that's my understanding of it. I don't know how true that is. But I think that's the reason why Mont'ka can succeed over here is that more people are willing to come out and play and come out and do things. So Mont'ka can succeed. But as far as when it comes to just myself playing Mont'ka versus the other detachments, I mean, in all of 9th edition, after the AP nerf to Mont'ka, I played Kaoyun the entire time. So I've been able to play both strategies. And as soon as we got that new codex, I was just Mont'ka all day. I think a big thing for it, is it can cover for your mistakes a lot.
Yeah.
Just because you are so mobile. And you got players like Kyle Grundy who they are very precise and very good at the game. I play every game on a clock because I think at the start of each one of my turns, and I'm commonly down on the clock on my opponent. And I even tell my opponent when I put the clock up, like, I'm going to be down on time. It's okay. I just need some time to think to keep myself in check. But there are times where if I was playing another detachment, I'd just be wildly out of position. So Mont'ka kind of helps cover for some mistakes. And it also scares some of the players that, once I got to top cut, some of the players just stayed really, really far back because they were really afraid of the things that I could do. So it does buy you some space. And then the other half for me personally is, man, if you're playing big holes, that -1 damage strat, almost no one's ready for it. So it really lets you just put stuff out in long shooting lanes and just win that shooting duel. Like against Hypercrypt, he got to dictate when that fight start. And he started that fight, and I won the fight ultimately just because I had that -1 damage strat. And instead of having to shoot, one of his annihilation, not the annihilation barge, but the big
DDA.
rail cannon thing that.
Doomsday.
Yeah, instead of having to shoot one of the big DDAs at a Riptide to kill it, he had to shoot 2. And I rolled just a little bit hot, and that was the difference in that Riptide living and dying just because of that -1 damage, right? So I think it does a lot of stuff for us players that are a little bit less perfect. It kind of covers for our mistakes, buys us some space against some better players, and then also gives us some durability to really sit back and just be like, it's okay if you shoot me for a round. That's been my philosophy on it as I've thought more about it. I've played the other detachments, but man, advance and shoot on these small maps. I've been playing since 5th edition when it was 6x4. But these maps are so small. Advance and shoot is such a powerful rule. And it is hard to get around how powerful that rule is. If your opponent makes a mistake, they are gone. That flank is collapsed. And I think that's the other half of it for me. Both that kind of meta-contextual stuff that I've talked about before with the defense and how it makes your opponent play, blah, 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 blah. But also, you can just get people. You just go and you get them. And that's something that I've learned from a couple of people that have taught me how to play Tau. I've had conversations with a couple of people that are real aggressive players, and the ability just to go get them when they make that mistake, that can just win you games right on the spot.
Having that.
And that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that'll help you make top cuts sometimes.
100%. Yeah, clearly. To your guys' point, and Mont'ka was the top performing detachment over the weekend, which is pretty cool. But I think you were right on the money there, right? There's a little bit more margin for error in Mont'ka. Having you should put a railgun hammerhead on the table to see how people pre-measure 16 inches in every direction from that thing. Because again, to your point, the threat projection, it is really important. And in shootout, like Mont'ka just wins shootouts.
Solves that problem I talked about earlier.
I can vouch firsthand how hard people pre-measure a railhead in Mont'ka. They are very, very careful about it, which gets you a little more board respect, and it kind of leans into the like the army is so good at kind of maintaining board presence for those first few minutes. But to kind of give my opinion on Mont'ka, I've heard a lot of players say this, and a lot of good players say this, but I think Tau's pretty sick right now because if you're an early game player, you have a detachment. If you're a late player, you have a detachment. If you like suits and movement, you have a detachment. Like, pretty great. You cannot say that about almost any other army. That like there's a way to play for almost every type of player that could want to get into an army, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
For me, since I kind of came from Ironstorm, fast tempo holes, Mont'ka is just like what I want.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure like Riley was saying, a very high end player sometimes might not need that extra 6 inches of movement. Me as a fairly new player, there are a lot of times where that covers a mistake I made. I might have missed a shooting angle measurement by an inch, half inch. I'm like, wow, because of the detachment I'm playing, that issue is just fixes my mistake.
Yeah.
That, or if like I didn't see an OC play that was coming, or if I didn't maybe I didn't happened in a few of my games where I didn't pre-measure, or I might have mis-pre-measured what kind of OC play I could have done with a devilfish. But since I have an auto advance 6, the throw range is ginormous.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
It's insane. You can drop preachers 21 inches away and just steal objectives and kill things, and that I think is just super powerful. And to kind of come back to what Riley was saying, -1 damage is what makes the shark as good as it is.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't have that, like the shark comes in, sometimes it's just gonna die. But in Mont'ka, I can rapid it for free, bank that CP against basically almost any army. Very few exceptions are going to be able to get through a shark that is in my deployment zone that I kind of preemptively help screen out from the threats being around me. That -1 damage is just there for it, and it goes so well with the model. And since I really want to play the model right now, I think it kind of brings it full circle of why I think that detachment is so solid, especially for the way I'm trying to play Tau.
Sure.
Yep. If you are playing a Tiger Shark, you should play Dark Strider just to prevent opponents from doing shenanigans to you.
Oh man, I learned that the hard way. Round 2, played against a very good demon player. I messed up my screening ever so slightly in my deployment zone. Dropped a dude, prevented a rapid. I happened to go first because I only had 2 chances to rapid. And the model that he dropped had the base size was so perfect for it that I couldn't, without charging and wrapping it, which I didn't want to do against the model as Tau, I couldn't get dudes to prevent the next tiny little like 20 mil base that was going to be 3 inch in that same exact spot. And basically the shark died in reserves. That was one of the 2 games I lost at Nova was due to that. So yeah, no, that sold me on Dark Strider. He's probably coming in somehow. Haven't figured that one out yet because 60 points is real awkward when a Fireblade is 50 and like a Piranha is 55. So
stealth suits are 60 and you're like never gonna drop one of those.
Yeah, it's just like I don't know how it's happening. He'll probably come in at some point for some testing, but yeah.
I tried not to put you on the spot there, Noah, so I made it more generic. But
hey, no, it's really funny. It was obviously like a big moment when it happened because man, this is like super pivotal, and like it was like game 2 of the event. So man, this might be like an early out for me out of this event. And then we kind of rallied after it, went on like a 7-game win streak or whatever it was. But my day 2 and day 3, I walked up to the table, and there were 2 separate opponents both said, "Hey man, it's cool you're running a Tiger Shark. Did you hear about that guy that had a screen the other day and it died in reserves?" I was like, I am becoming a meme. I am becoming a meme of this event.
Hey, good thing you finished strong 1-7-2 though. It would have been a lot harder of an event to swallow if you lost 4 or 5
absolutely.
games. Yeah.
Oh no, I had to go and rally after that one.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool guys. I think like the major takeaway there, Noah, I think to your point, like Tau's in a really healthy spot. If anything, as far as like the meta leaderboards are concerned, who knows how much help we're gonna get, if any. But where we're at, I feel like is a pretty fair spot. And yeah, there's a lot of play. There's a lot of adaptability to like what the meta brings us. Like if we do start seeing more and more true like Chaos Cults or Green Tide or Crusader spam, we have the tools to deal with that. Same thing with like the meta skewing towards heavier stuff. So I think it's a really exciting time to be a Tau player, and we've got a lot of tools at our disposal. Were you gonna say something, Riley?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing Tau since 5th edition, and competitively since start of ninth. And, even when Tau were at that like 47-48% win rate, I'd go to GTs and still go X1, X2, just because of what tools the Army had access to in ninth, and we've got better tools in 10th.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tau is kind of a, medium skill floor. As long as you don't get touched when you start playing Tau, you're going to do okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then relatively high skill ceiling Army. It's not as high skill ceiling as like Yanari, Drukari, and Eldari. There are some wizards out there that last edition, when they had a 45% win rate, were going 6-0, 5-1 every GT. But I really truly think that any Tau specialist can have success, and as long as we keep getting these rules that give us opportunities like we've had the past 3 editions, basically, you can take Tau and win any event with it. It's going to be hard, but there's always some Tau player that's going to go X1 or XO at an event, and you'll just look at them and be like, man, how the heck do you win with that? Because and then you'll take a list and you'll do well with it, and some people come up to you and be like, dude, how are you winning with your list? Everyone's got a different style, and everyone can succeed with this Army. That's what I've always found.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have quite the historical 40K background. I've only been playing for a little less than a year now. But I will say on the comment of where I think I was in meta, we are in such a good spot because we're about to hit a data slate. I think we are in no issue of getting touched. We're not. I would be amazed if we got touched. Now, if the shark goes to Legends, that's one thing. I'm not going to be shocked.
It's coming.
But it's coming. Hey, but until they take it from me, it's getting played.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And that's
my Tiger Shark has base, has the Tetras on the base.
Oh, no way.
Because as soon as the Tetras went to Legends, I just put them on my Tiger Shark base, and I'm just like, yeah, this is my ode to Legends, because we all know where this is going.
Just ship them all away at one time.
Yeah.
It's gonna get played until it gets.
I'll definitely do it. It's so much fun to play.
No, it really is. But yeah, no, I think there are a few factions I think everyone is well aware of what needs to come down, and like, let's just say, in theory, Sisters, Thousand Sons, Wolves, maybe name your other flavor of top 3 or 5 faction comes down a little bit, and we don't get touched. Cool. Now we're in an even better spot. So
I think
I'm excited because this is the first time in 40K or my year of playing that I've been on a faction that was not like somewhat in the sights of Games Workshop, or at least I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like, because when I was playing Ironstorm, like, I knew nerfs were. I was playing that Raven list since January. So like every time a slate comes, like, all right, where am I losing points this time? Do I have to remove 1, 2 scout squads this time? And it was always like a preparing for the next thing. Now I'm just like, found an army, very respectable, balanced spot, doing okay with it. Let's see where these, let's see how much these top actions come down. I don't expect to get a buff per se. It'd be nice to get back a few points to those hammerheads that they took away from us last patch. That felt a little slightly uncalled for. But
the hammerheads they're really good. But what were you going to say?
Just give them anti-vehicle, anti-monster 5-up. It's fine. No problems could possibly happen.
The only instance of it in the game. Yeah, and I think, to your point, like, a lot of those armies that are staring nerfs down the barrel are our natural predators, right? Thunderwolf Cav, like, I just don't get it, man. I don't know how they've been able to eke away without any nerfs. But I actually looked it up because I was curious, and they are cheaper than Krutox Rampagers. Like,
really?
That's wild. Dude, by 10 points. It's like 100 for 3 Thunderwolf Cav. How? And then it's 110 for 3 Rampagers. It's disgusting.
That's wild. I think
they move faster. They have so much more, like, better durability. They have +1 damage on the charge. They move faster. Like, it's just, anyways.
Yeah, I think if anything, some of our Kroot might come down.
That's what I'm hoping.
How they murked our Kroot detachment.
Yeah.
And if our Krutox Rampagers come down a little bit, just having that little bit of melee threat just to make it combined arm to buy us some more space would be appreciated.
Yeah.
That's my pipe dream for the next data slate. It's just all of our Kroot come down a little bit.
I don't think it's a pipe dream because, like, I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that the Kroot get changed they just brought out this super nice box set. Everyone owns the models. You know, give us like 5 or 10 points on everything because everything's overcosted. The whole across the board. It's not just the rampagers. It's carnivores. You know, they're basically cultists, right? Why?
Yeah.
Yep.
Why are our cultists 75 and everyone else's are 60 or 65? You know, some of the characters. I mean, probably the Lone Spear is not going to get touched, but I'm hoping some of the more mainline units do, and because I do like my trash.
Yeah.
Big trash.
Oh,
Yeah.
I would play with Croutons in 9th edition, and my opponents would be like, "I've never seen 4 models do so much work," and I'm like, "Yeah, man, 4 models, and they're gonna buy me, 30 victory points just by stopping you from scoring 10, and they're gonna score me 20."
Yeah. Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, carnivores come down, they would find a way in the list. Sticky would be
objectives is so strong.
Sticky would be nuts. Good, like efficient Sticky in an army that shoots as hard as we do would just be so nice.
Yeah, I mean, you can already with the scout, you can touch on search your home and the middle if you go first, which is really nice. Because something else that Mont'ka plays really well into, which is like the go first, like going first in general, which is usually tough for most armies right now. So like being able to kind of bet more on that with like a simple switch from, something like a strike team to the carnivores is important. And bottom line, the only reason I don't like taking him is just because losing the guides. Like, if I'm like in retaliation, Sticky would be sick, but I kind of need the 2 strike teams just to have or like 1 strike team on my home just as a backup guide that I could stick out at an angle and say, hey, okay, I'm gonna at least ignore cover. Like, they have a decent debuff, so hopefully they compensate for that fact that like Kroot don't, they don't synergize with the army rules, so they should be valued differently.
Yep. I think another reason I've liked Mont'ka so much is in Pariah. It seems a plurality, if not the majority of the missions, you really want to go second. I think the only mission I can really think of off the top of my head where you want to go first is like Terraform. But all the rest of them, I'm generally just like, man, I really hope I go second.
Yeah.
I think Mont'ka can at least in my experience, has really helped me overcome that going second disadvantage that I feel. That also may be part of the playstyle that I've adopted, where going second is more comfortable, just because I played elves. That's the other army that I play besides Tau, and elves like love going second. So maybe that's kind of built into my playstyle and how I play, but I really think Mont'ka helps overcome some of that disadvantage that Pariah has been handing out, where a lot of missions you want to go second.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would tend to agree.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think it's something that I brought up to John a while back when we were doing some game reviews of past games, and having an ability to start pushing the issue if you do go first, where everyone wants to go second, and a lot of people are just teching their list to be better if you go second, super powerful. That's why I was so obsessed with the triple piranha unit, because I don't know if you've messed around with that, Riley, but like if you're looking for something that can do something if you go first, that unit is hilarious. That unit
I've got
moving
like 10 piranhas, so I should try it out.
That unit is moving 29 inches and will kill a Land Raider on average. It is silly. It's fun. It just sucks. There's the moment you run into something that's not Land Raider shaped, it starts not super happy. If you run into 20 boys, you're not super happy with having it. It's so good at move blocking. But yeah, no, being able to do something that is positive tempo if you go first and actually have it stick and not just like set something on objective to die and let them start to play the tempo game seems super important in Pariah. I really enjoy playing Mont'ka for that reason as well.
Yeah. Just being able to push when you need to, because there is like a critical moment when you're going first where your opponent's just going to score their early secondaries turn 1 that they can. They'll take a 3 even or a 5 on something, ditch the other secondary, and then it's like, all right, what are you going to do now? Well, like if we keep playing this game, like you're going to lose this. At some point, you have to start influencing your opponent's game plan and their like sphere of control, and if you can't do that, you're just going to lose the game.
Yep.
And I feel like that's kind of a hard thing to do is like outside of Mont'ka and even in Mont'ka sometimes like layout 1, for instance, if we're in that exact situation that you were talking about, it's very hard to interrupt a plan from behind a ruin.
Yeah.
So that's
100%.
Rapid ingress and breachers, man. That's what
hell
won
yeah.
me my layout 1 matchups.
Dude,
No,
I'm gonna try that out. It's a great idea.
Absolutely. I love that we both kind of established that like that was an issue, and we both have solutions. My solution is the shark. It solves that problem, right? You can't stage behind the layout 1L, right? And so it's very important.
It is one of big
issue to solve.
Yeah, 100%. It's probably our biggest weakness. And you said, Riley, you played into World Eaters on that layout?
You know what? I think I'm mistaken. World Eaters might have been day 2.
Okay. Word.
I know I played into a bunch of Chaos on day 1. So round 1 was Chaos Space Marines.
Got it.
But I'm trying to remember the rest of my rounds. I can look it up here.
Oh, no worries, dude.
But yeah, every single one of my opponents staged there, and I just was like, all right, this fish is gonna come in here, and they're like, oh no, I did play against World Eaters on that layout on day 1.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a spooky one, man. That is.
It really is.
You just gotta hope and pray they don't get advanced charge.
Yep. It was Chaos Space Marines, World Eaters, and Dark Angels Gladius on that layout on day 1.
Oof.
It was a rough day 1.
Holy crap.
Those are a bunch of matchups that I do not want to be on layout 1-4.
Well, fortunately, the Chaos Space Marines matchup was Soulforge Warpack. And that matchup is just kind of rides on a knife's edge. One of you is going to table the other one in 1 turn. You just have to rely on the fact that you're more mobile than them and play around that they can walk through walls. And as long as you do that, you can generally win that matchup. But we've got a pretty good CSM player locally here that'll play everything.
Wow.
In that codex, and that's what I found. Where like, if a Forge Fiend comes out and they pop, full bars, reroll to wound, and all of, or not reroll to wound. That's in
That's Renegade
Dark. Yeah. But if they pop their super Dark Pact, and if you don't have -1 damage, you can just kiss that Riptide goodbye.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep. That detachment shoots so incredibly hard.
Yep. So that was a nice edge where, I got to come out first because I had some speed. He and I was just gonna eat the Forge Fiend coming on from reserve on the chin. Just made sure I had -1 damage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing that I did actually a lot at this event. A lot more than I've done in the past is, just purposely not score a secondary just to pitch for a CP, to have that 2 CP or 3 for the -1 damage strat. Sometimes it's all about the points, but in other matchups, you're like, you know what? The difference in 2 points in a Riptide living is big enough here where I'm just not going to walk into the middle of the board and score the new deploy teleport homers, whatever it's called. Like, is that 2 points really worth not having that strat online? I think I'd rather just have that strat online.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a decision that I always made, but I made it a couple of times. And I think it's something just to have in your back pocket that's good to think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is a terrifying decision in Pariah. I feel like that's one that you kind of have to come to after reps, whatever matchup.
Yeah.
You have to know that, like,
it's a feeling thing almost.
This is going to be worth it, because if this is a hairy game and I'm playing Sisters with Thousand Suns and every point matters, that's a much harder decision.
Yeah. But if you look across the table and it's a lot of 3 damage, a lot of 2 damage, you know how much value you can get out of -1 damage. And I think that is like one of the CP usage, whether or not to score a secondary or ditch one. I feel like that in and of itself is like a mini game of Pride that's like exceptionally important, right? And I think it just is important to like be a good player at Warhammer in general, but I just kind of had like the aha moment recently where I've, maybe CP rerolled something early on in the game, or gotten to the end of the game and thought to myself, hey, like I was really in position to score secondaries early. Like I'm going first. I drew 2 unscorable secondaries, but I have infiltrators all across the midboard. They can even touch my opponent's deployment zone. Like I should have just spent a CP there to try to guarantee some secondary points while I have the ability to score them.
Yeah, for newer Tau players, I would really challenge you to play 5 games without using CP reroll once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you will be astonished at how much more effective your army actually is.
Yep.
In the 9 rounds of Nova, I probably CP rerolled 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the damage on a hunter killer for 2 of them And then the third one, I can't remember, but I am really, really remiss to CP reroll unless it is incredibly valuable. And incredibly valuable is the difference in killing a land raider and not.
Yep.
Not saving wounds on a Riptide most of the time.
Sure. And like on a 2-up as opposed to like, okay, half the time the CP that I spend
CP
gets
rerolling
value.
the 4-up.
Yeah.
Almost never.
Sure.
And that's just my personal philosophy, but I will commonly see in the early rounds people just be spending CP rerolls on 4-up invulns. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. 4s be fickle.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 turns later, they're like, man, if I just had the CP to do something. Now, we're Tau players. We're a little bit spoiled. We don't have to charge people, so we don't have to CP reroll charges.
That's
I think charges is one of the few things you almost always CP reroll.
Mm-hmm.
We're a little bit spoiled where we don't ever have to do that, or rarely.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that was a big level up moment for me, was just going 5 games not spending CP and being like, man, I really don't need the CP reroll as often as I thought I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think CP rerolls should be reserved for players armies who just have the extra CV. It's like, you know what, knock yourself out. Like,
Dark
you've got
Angels, Eldar,
whatever, buddy. But not us, right? Because our strats are really strong, and we should be saving for them. And I think it's a great, it's a great reminder for me as well to really think critically about my CP spend the first couple of rounds of a game and even later on.
Yep.
Yeah, especially in a detachment like Mont'ka that actually has strats you want to use early.
Yeah.
Like
that plus 1
on
AP
it's a lot easier
strat
to not spend. Yeah.
Plus 1 AP is really good.
Especially on breachers. It's the difference between handing someone like Magnus, 5, like having them take 5 damage versus having them take 9. That's massive on a 16 wound model.
100%. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you for sticking to the end. If you did enjoy, if you could drop a like or a comment down below for the algorithm, that would be greatly appreciated. If you're new here, what we do at Tau Tactics is we interview high-level players, get an understanding of their thoughts of the Tau matchup. In this case, we talked to a couple Tau players, but I've also had a top Sisters player in the world, top Drukhari player in the world on the channel, and really, it's just in the hopes of getting better. That's what my goal is here, is to get better as a Warhammer player and bring you along that journey. So, until the next one, I will catch you later. Peace.